Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. Thanks so much for listening. Today, I've got a great show with a great friend, Dr. Howie Knopf is here. We're going to be talking about improving teacher hiring and staffing. Okay, student success, as you know, depends on teachers, and that's why the selection process is so important. Howie, hi, Howie. Good morning. This is the president of Project Achieve. He is one of the most respected voices in education. Project Achieve works with school districts all over the country. Howie writes for us on our magazine and on our website all the time. He's a specialist in social emotional learning, skills instruction, multi-tiered interventions, etc., etc. Licensed psychologist, nationally certified school psychologist, and past president, yes, he is, by the National Association of School Psychologists, and I think this is about the 50th time he's been on the show, and they always get the highest rating. So, Howie, welcome to today's show. Dr. Knopf.
Well, good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm fine, buddy. Improving teacher hiring and staffing, it's tough these days. The student success depends on the quality of the teacher. Okay, the pipelines are low. A lot of people are thinking of leaving the profession. So when we find somebody that we want, we got to make sure it's the right person and how the selection process should work, etc. So why don't you just, Howie, talk about that if you want. Everybody, you can reach Howie over, I got the email right here, projectachieve.info, projectachieve.info, and he's got a blog over there, etc. Howie, talk about why this is so important these days. What's the implications of approaching it properly?
Well, I mean, the long-term implications are teacher effectiveness in the classroom means that we have students that are learning from an academic and a social, emotional, and behavioral sense more effectively. But the short term is that we've also got to look at how effective teachers help other effective teachers as you look at the continuum from preschool through high school. And, you know, it's critical right now because right now school is about to end, and the tradition in terms of teacher hiring is that the hiring occurs toward the end of the year, if not into the summer, and it's often done, and again, I'm not being critical, but it's often being done by administrators. You've got lots of districts. It's interesting. The larger districts, some of them, there's an HR person at the district office that does the hiring, and then they distribute the individuals that are hired down to the individual schools. And the principals really don't have a whole lot of say in it. But then the trickle down in smaller districts is that a lot of times the hiring is being done just by the administrators. And I really believe it needs to be a team approach. It needs to be an interview process and an interview team that involves administrators, teachers, related service professionals, and others. And again, we don't want this to get large and bulky, but we want this to be collegial, and we want to make sure that we're attracting the right people to the right positions.
Absolutely, and it's harder and harder to find these people, Howie. What do you do in this day and age? And I agree with you wholeheartedly that we got to get more teachers involved. We'll talk about this in a minute. But how do we set up an interview process for in an age when we really have to be aggressive in hiring teachers? It's not like it used to be. It's different. What are we actually looking for out there? How do we set up that selection process? Maybe that's the way I want to ask the question. How do we make sure that we get the right people in there? What do we do?
Well, there are multiple layers, all right, but let's just focus in on one right now. Okay. We need to know, first of all, what the position requires. So it's not the title of the position. It's what are the job duties? What are the areas of expertise? What are the component parts to it? And again, sometimes not to dichotomize, you know, an elementary hire is different than a high school hire, let's just say, because, you know, at the high school, you're usually hiring for an academic specialty position, where at the elementary, it's more of an all-purpose. You have some departmentalization, but not a lot. But the point is that we want people to be hired into the position where they understand what it is that's going to be expected of them. And so we've got to have a fairly detailed, this is what we want the teacher to be able to do. And that includes effective instruction, that includes, the pedagogy, that includes the classroom management and so on. But that hiring process should be a matching process. And then it becomes, if you will, a diagnostic process, because you're not going to get the perfect candidate. But if you've got a delineated, a differentiated job description, you have people when you're hiring them that may have some areas of gap. And then when we get into the orientation and the induction process, their first year, their first 3 years, what we can do is we can say, all right, this is what you need to know in general about our school, our district, the way we do things. But also in your interview process, here were some of the gaps, and we want to make sure that we are consciously filling those gaps in. And again, I gave you one of the primary examples, which is classroom management. And you and I have talked about this in the past. And again, no disrespect, but most classroom teachers, both special ed and regular ed, do not get the kind of training, supervision, and coaching pre-certification before they leave the university. And we're not even talking about the alternative certification folks, which we can add in, but they don't come into the field with the classroom management expertise. And that's one of the reasons many times that the teachers are leaving within the first 5 years, is that they're not successful in classroom management. And not that it's quite a prerequisite, but if you don't have management of your classroom, it's awfully hard to do the instruction.
So Howard, this is interesting. Where does the hiring process, let me say it that way, where should the hiring process begin? Okay, you have administration and their needs, and you have you're going to be working with your collegiate friends, okay, your colleagues. You got to meet them and make sure you get along with them. In your opinion, where should the process begin? Should it begin with the administrator making sure the person has the, quote, academic, I'll call it that, academic requirements, and then it goes to a group of teachers, let's say, who decide if this person can work with them well? Or should it go the other way? All right, where they can meet somebody, find out if they can work together, et cetera, and then let the principal make the final decision. I'm just curious how you think that process should work.
Well, there are many roads to Rome. So, I'm going to give you a blueprint. And, different districts are going to do it different ways.
I'm talking about U.S.
districts,
not Italian ones, Howie. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, the first, and I already emphasized it, is we've got to have a differentiated job description that really details out some of the job qualities, some of the professional qualities that we want of the candidate. Then, I think what happens is I think that will help to attract the right people to the right positions. But the interview process, I think, needs to be a carousel process. And I think that process, again, not just involving all the different people that I spoke about earlier, but that it's a multiple interview process. So there are different interview teams. There's an opportunity for some informal discussion and, just trying to get a sense of the collegiality of the person. But what about a job simulation? Okay. What about having that teacher, prompted with specific dilemmas and questions and crises, and talk about how would you go about doing this? And I know some interviews do this, but if we want a classroom teacher to teach, what about the teacher coming in and showing some lesson plans and doing a demonstration, actually going up in front of a simulated classroom and doing a demonstration, or bringing in videotapes of that, whether that, again, is from their pre-service training or, experienced people that are just doing lateral transfers. So why don't we make this into something where we're getting more information on an informal and informal basis, on a collegial basis and a professional basis. And it's not going to be a simple, which is the tradition, a simple 45-minute sit-down with one person trying to check off the boxes and do your best to get the right person.
It's so interesting, and there are companies that in teacher development, that have ways to photograph teachers, et cetera, video teachers when they're working this way. Are you finding, and you work with a lot of districts, are you finding that a lot of districts are actually using your suggestions in this regard, that they are really sitting there? And the other thing that's brought up, you know, you have long-term substitutes that go in and substitute teachers that go in. Do they have an advantage because they've been working in that school for a while? Should we look at them first? Talk about that.
Well, you know, the substitutes and especially the paraprofessionals are certainly being tapped into more often in terms of moving them up and supporting them financially and otherwise to get them into the pipeline. But are a lot of districts using my ideas? I'll be honest with you, no, they're really not. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to have a quantum. Well, we've got to have a quantum shift here in terms of thinking about what we're doing. And a lot of, I work in some very small rural districts, and it's very difficult to get even one person in for the candidate. But exactly. I understand that, and that is the reality. I'm not here trying to solve the teacher shortage issue. What I'm trying to do is on the other side of it, I'm trying to make sure that we don't hire the wrong person. Because quite honestly, Larry, it takes longer, I hate to say it this way, but it takes longer to terminate or get rid of an ineffective anything. Okay, today we're just talking about teachers. We could be talking about related service people in terms of counselors, psychologists, and social workers. We could be talking about administrators here, okay, and we would have somewhat of the same conversation, because it's all about education and the educational system. But the issue, again, focusing right now on teachers, is that it is much more difficult to terminate an ineffective teacher than it is to wait and hire the right teacher, or to hire the right teacher with some of the ideas that we're putting on the table. A last point I want to make before we move on is that sometimes when you enhance the value, you enhance the integrity, you enhance even the competitiveness of a position, more people want it. And so, you know, I think sometimes what happens is when people know that this school, this district, really is careful about its hiring process. And as a classroom teacher, if I'm a fourth grade teacher, if I know that there are crackerjack third grade teachers behind me and crackerjack second grade teachers behind them, then I know that when my kids come to me the next school year, they have had effective instruction along the continuum, which means that I can move on. I mean, nobody, and again, I hate to say it this way, but this is the reality out in the field. Nobody wants to follow in the classroom as a classroom teacher. I don't want to be the classroom teacher who inherits a classroom of students from a teacher who was less effective, because then I have to fill more gaps because of the ineffectiveness. And so it's trying to raise the whole integrity of the process. But
it has to be done.
It's got to be done. Let's do it the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. And the harm done by an ineffective teacher, you're talking about the harm done on the next teacher, but the harm done to the students by hiring an ineffective person because you've made a mistake in hiring. Okay, you know, people tend to blame I'll call that person the ineffective person, but the fact is that ineffective person should not have been hired in the first place. Okay, and in this day and age, okay, that's a very hard thing, because as we talked about, there's a teacher shortage. Okay, the teacher pipeline is less and less, particularly in certain subjects. Okay, but putting a warm body up there is not the answer. It's putting the right person up there as best you can in this day and age. And if we don't have it down to a really good system that has changed with the times we live in, okay, then we're going to have serious problems right down the line. You can just take the third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, etc. There's a reason why we have grade by grade by grade, okay? And if we don't back it up, we're going to have problems all the way down the line. It's unbelievable. And besides that initial hiring practice, okay, the other thing, and this is the key thing, Howie, to me, is the retention if we have a good person, we got to make sure they stay. All right, and part of
Absolutely.
that, and I know you're huge on this. Okay, is an effective orientation process. If we don't get that right, that person's going to be floundering. We got to make it work. Okay, Howie, talk about in your opinion. Again, you're an expert on this, in my opinion. What are the characteristics of an effective orientation process for newly hired teachers? And by the way, that includes experienced teachers and brand new teachers. They're orienting to a new district, a new school, perhaps a new grade. Okay, and you got to, as an administrator and as a colleague, you have to move them forward appropriately. Howie, talk about an effective orientation process.
All right, so let's go big picture, and then we'll go backwards and go small picture. Because for me, this is what we're talking about here. It's got 4 pillars, okay? And right now I'm writing a 4-part series of blogs on my website about this, and I posted part 2, and part 3 is coming in the next week or so, and then part 4. So here are the 4 pillars.
ProjectAchieve.info. Good.
There you go. The first pillar is the hiring and the orientation process. Pillar is the induction and the teacher tenure process. The third pillar is continuing teacher appointment and coaching. And then the 4th pillar is teacher leadership and advancement. So it's not quite a job progression, okay, but it's a process of supporting teachers over time and then moving teachers up into a leadership and a mentorship process and then a specialization process. So it's kind of a job advancement, but it's all about effective teaching. And if we don't do the induction right and the tenure process right, and like the second blog, I call it Tenure with Teeth, because I think teachers, as well as related service, as well as administrators, need to earn tenure. You're not bestowed tenure. You're not given tenure because of seat time, because of 3 years in rank. You earn tenure because of the things that you're able to demonstrate progressively and through growth that you're doing. But to go back to the orientation process, so a teacher's now hired, and now they're entering their new school, whether they're entering as brand new teachers, whether it's through an alternative track or through a teacher training track, or they're lateral teachers and they're coming in, it's a new school and they're experienced teachers. We've got to make sure that we're orienting the teachers in the most effective ways. And yet still, we keep losing professional development time, and we keep losing days right before the new school year starts. Most school districts have maybe 3 or 4 days maximum, and probably modal, they have 2. They have 2 days to orient all of the teachers to the new school year, never mind the new teachers.
That's right.
So what happens in the orientation process is we've got to orient our new hires not just to the climate, the culture, the policies and procedures of the new school, but we've also got to orient them to the broader picture of who they're working with, the curriculum, the instruction, what are the resources in the district, the technology, what are some of the special areas of professional development that most of the staff are now 2 or 3 years into, but the new hire is already behind. So we've got to have a thoughtful orientation process, but it can't just be 2 days. It's got to start perhaps with a couple of those days before the school year starts, but it has to stay for the entire year perhaps. And again, it's on a needs basis. So I'm not saying, all right, it's got to be a 1 calendar year process, but it's got to be available for the teachers relative to their individual needs. We still have teachers. I see it every single day out in the field, whether I'm in Oklahoma or New Jersey or Michigan or California where I was last week, okay? You know, I still see in for example, high schools, okay? We have large high schools. I see teachers who have been in the high school for 5 years and still do not even know the names of their colleagues, much less their areas of expertise.
They've been,
and
stop. They've been in the school for 5 years. They don't know the names of their colleagues. Did you just say that?
Yes, absolutely.
They don't know the names of their colleagues?
They do not know the names of their colleagues, much less. It's because we're not focusing on the orientation and the broader and the different layers of orientation. You know, we have large organizations. I mean, thinking about it as a business. But I mean, when you're in a business as opposed to a school district, sometimes what happens, the business folks make sure that you know all the people that you need to interact with and all the resources and so on, because the bottom line is money. It's profit. Well, when the bottom line in education is kids, somehow there just isn't the same mindset. And I'm not blaming, again, anyone, but I'm saying we've got to be conscious about the support process for teachers, the hiring, the orientation, the induction process. Okay? The teacher induction process, from my perspective, ought to be a 3-year process, especially for new hires. Okay? You don't get tenure usually until your 3rd year. But what are we doing to help support, to coach, to mentor, to make sure that the new hires in a 3-year period of time have the expertise that all the other teachers have and have the specialization that they need to be successful in their classroom? So we're not taking and focusing in on this area. We focus in on filling positions, but not ensuring that we're hiring the right people and giving them the support so that hopefully in the back end, one of your critical areas, we're retaining people because they feel supported and they feel prepared.
Howie, I'm going to ask a silly question. The question is why? Why has this happened? Okay, and what frustrates me is that I'm going to say it again, we're in changing times, all right? And what you're describing is not a good system. Your ideas are great. Don't misunderstand that, but the system we're in now is not a great system. We're somehow allowed, I don't know, bureaucracy to screw this up, okay? We can't afford that anymore, all right? And why does this happen? Well, what's gone wrong over the years? It's because every school doesn't have an HR director. Where are we on all this? Does every school need an HR person? Where are we?
You know, honestly, and not to make excuses for my colleagues, but you know, Larry, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and when this isn't on the landscape in the training process, and when it's not in the landscape in the functional day-to-day process, I mean, educators are having to think about so many different things, but so do businessmen, so do electricians, so do doctors, so I mean, I don't want to make too many excuses, and I guess the point is the things that we're talking about today are important. And if some of these ideas, and let's just call them think tank ideas, okay? I don't, I'm not on the pedestal. I don't have the perfect storm, but I mean, I think that some of these ideas have value, and I know they have value because, quite honestly, a lot of the things that I'm talking about are parallel to how most universities run. So for people that say, oh, well, this would never work in education, look at the university. Look at your universities and how assistant professors get tenured and how they go through the hiring process. When I went through the hiring process back in the 1800s, in the Dark Ages, okay, to get my first, assistant professor position, I went in for it was a 2-day interview. Okay, I had to give a lecture. There was a recruitment. There was a committee. There was a committee that I was focused on and addressing. There wasn't one person. I didn't meet with just the dean. The dean didn't just bring me in, talk to me for 45 minutes, and then hire me. Okay, so there was a process, and you can sit here and you can say, all right, well, wait a minute, universities are smaller than schools. But honestly, a lot of schools that I work in, they're only having 3 to 5 openings a year, and so you could do a carousel kind of approach.
Yeah,
you could bring in a number of candidates. Okay, so there are creative ways to do this, but my point is that not that the university is exactly like a school or a district down at the K-12 level, but we're doing some of this in education, and it seems to be working a lot better than it's working at our K-12 level, okay? You don't have a lot of university professors that leave because they were not well matched to the university. They leave for other different reasons, okay? And yet what happens in education is we're talking about teacher burnout, and we're talking about, teachers that are quitting and leaving and going to other, and I get all that, and some of that is just the natural ebb and flow of any profession. But at the same time, I know that we can keep more teachers if we're supporting more teachers. And part of that supporting process starts at the hiring level, and then moves into the orientation, moves into the induction, moves into the tenure.
Hey, Howie, when you talk to a lot of superintendents, they're your clients and your friends out there, when you talk to them about all this, okay, what's their answer? What do they say?
Most of the time, they agree with me.
Yeah.
It's not on the landscape. Yeah, it's I'm in districts where we're talking about we're talking about 500 students in the district, as opposed to I'm talking with superintendents where there are 50 or 100,000 students in the district. And again, the basic principles are logical. They say, yes, these make sense. The question is, how do we operationalize them? And that's, the art and the science. But, the principles of hiring people and the principles of tenuring people where they're earning tenure, they're pretty universal. And again, sometimes the superintendents haven't thought about it, or sometimes the superintendents are in such large districts that they've got other people that are supposed to be thinking about it.
They do have to think about it. Howie, given all this and everything that's going on these days, this is a little bit off the track, but how do you feel about just tenure in general? Are we making a mistake to have tenure after just 2 years? Should it be 5 years? Should there be tenure at all? Okay, should there be renewable tenure? I don't know. I'm coming up with this stuff. What's your thoughts on that? Is tenure good or bad these days?
No, you just answered a lot of it. No, I think there should be tenure. For me, the tenure process should be, I would say, a 5-year process, okay?
Yeah.
So that you've got, in essence, 2 years of induction and then an additional 3 years. But the tenure has got to have teeth in it. So for me, when we're tenuring teachers, again, there's a tenure committee. The tenure committee makes a recommendation to either the principal or the superintendent. But I think we need to tenure in 3 areas. I think we need to tenure in instruction, curriculum and instruction. We need to tenure in terms of student outcomes, and we need to tenure in terms of service. Okay, so for example, service is, I really believe that every teacher in a school should be on one school level committee. And that, that committee is meeting on a regular basis, and it has a very functional piece of the school improvement process for every year. So when the teachers are getting tenured, they're putting in a portfolio. It's almost like for national certification, okay? They're putting in a portfolio at the end of their, in the middle of the 5th year, and they get tenure at the end of the 5th year. But the portfolio has different things that they've developed in terms of curriculum and instruction. It has videotapes. It has student outcomes. It has service to the school, the district, and the community. It has letters of recommendations and so on. So it's a portfolio. But then with that tenure, for me, Larry, there should be a significant salary bump. It shouldn't just be,
Agreed.
we go to the next step.
Agreed.
But there's a significant salary bump so that on the back side, and this is important on the front side, okay, but we've got so many teachers who, you want to talk about teacher burnout, and part of the burnout issue is that teachers are having to have second jobs in order to be able to support themselves. And so we've got to deal with that part of it. But the tenure, you get tenure, and then there's a significant salary bump. But I do believe that there should be continuing tenure, whether that's on an every 10-year basis or what have you. So I really
You mean a
believe
reevaluation? You mean a reevaluation of a person's tenure?
Exactly. Yeah.
I agree.
There's got to be a reevaluation process because we want to make sure that the teachers are moving up to the next level of excellence. But after tenure, for me, becomes either you're taking leadership positions at a higher level in the school or the district, or you're starting to specialize. So you become specialized in an area after tenure so that we don't have to have teachers going out to in-services or having to hire people to come in and do the one-shot in-service, but we're growing expertise and we have our own in-house professional development unit through all the expertise of the different teachers and support people that are in the district. So it's a continuing professional development and growth process, but on a much more conscious basis. But the short answer, I believe that teachers should get tenured, but it needs to be tenure with teeth.
Yeah, it needs to be tenure with teeth, and I do believe what you said, there needs to be a reevaluation, because sometimes some people are going to get mad at me for saying this, tenure breeds laziness, okay, and that's not good. I can see 10 years of tenure and then a reevaluation. Okay, and if somebody's not effective anymore, they need to be told that they either shape up or leave. Okay, it's that simple.
I agree with you. Some teachers,
and I love teachers. Don't misunderstand that, but human nature, teaching is one thing, and human nature is another. Okay.
But again, you've got the university model also, because everyone always worries. All right, so now we're tenuring these, now they're associate professors and they're going to rest on their laurels. And yes, a small percentage do, but let's not overgeneralize. A lot of times our teachers are creative, they're enthusiastic, they don't need external motivators.
Then you have nothing to
fear. But
at
the same time, there needs to be the accountability that, we still want to see what you're accomplishing post-tenure.
Yeah. It's just, like I keep saying this, the world out there is changing, okay? And the people who are becoming teachers are changing. They're different from you and I, Howie, the old guard, so to speak, all right? And we have to be aware of this and changing the way we look at things, changing the bureaucracy. That's why I love having you on the show, because you always got the great ideas that people, you think outside the box, okay, and bring those ideas to the bureaucracy, okay, that is education, Howie, and you make them work, okay, and I just love all this, okay. We got to go, my friend. This was just great. Thank you. Okay, how's Florida treating you, Howie?
It's great. I love it. But I'm heading off back into the schools next week. So
where are you going? What state are you going to? Where are you going?
Going up to New Jersey.
Enjoy. Okay, enjoy a Greek diner and a traffic circle, New Jersey.
Okay.
Okay, be good, Howie. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right, take care, Larry. Bye-bye.
Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye. Howie Knopf, everybody, of Project Achieve, projectachieve.info. Check out what he does over there. Check out what we do at ace-ed.org. Howie's really something, and he's a dynamo out there, and he's just really something. I love having him on the show. Okay, he's got great ideas, and I'm telling you, things have got to change. Okay, you know that, but we can't just talk about it. You got to make them happen. The things we talk about have to be made into action. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. Thanks for listening.